lovely afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I gotta say, no, I'm not in Washington, D.C., even though the photograph that I used for the thumbnail is in Washington, D.C. I am sitting here in Manhattan. In Manhattan, I'm adjusting my tie so that it's in the center, and I'm sitting here in Manhattan in front of this lovely, lovely, totally real painting, and it is a lovely day. I gotta say the weather outside is phenomenal. It is phenomenal weather. Amazing, amazing weather. Just utterly amazing weather, and it's the end of September as we know it. The end of the September as we know it, and I feel fine. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Be sure to hit that notifications bell. A lot of people are not getting notifications. I am going to try and do quite a few streams here this week. We shall see. Wish me luck with that. But hit the notifications bell so that you get notified. Hit the like button so that everyone knows how much you like this. And we are going to roll on ahead. I'm going to open. I've got plenty of unnamed diet beverage here to pour. Pouring unnamed diet beverage. Just pouring it and pouring it and pouring it. And the way this show works is that the second half of the show is all super chat questions being answered. So if you have a question you want me to answer, send me a super chat. I will write it down. It is those super chat questions. Those questions asked over a super chat that make the second half of the show so much fun. So much fun. So if you have a good question, shoot me a good super chat. I will do my best to answer it to the best of my ability. Be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the notifications bell. The first half of the show is just me giving my opening remarks. The second half of the show is the super chats. And in the middle, our halftime show is where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. I call you out, and we get to find out who it is on the other side of the camera, who is watching. The practice of redlining. Very good question. Redlining. That's a good question. So that's how it works. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Send me a super chat if you want me to give you an answer. That's in the second half of our show. I answer all the super chat questions. Very good. Plenty of unnamed diet beverage to drink. I'm pouring it into the ice, into the cup. Fukuyama. All right. And we will jump right into it. So I am about to start out with a little bit socialist government's duty, each virtue. I'm going to start out by talking about murder. Murder. All right, it's like an Agatha Christie novel. I should say murder, and then there should be like a thunderclap. Murder. Thunderclap. We're going to talk about murder. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, in the year of 2020, according to the FBI, there was a 30% increase in murder. 30% more murders happened in the year of 2020 than in the year of 2019, according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They have released their crime statistics, and in the year of 2020, there were 30% more murders. There were actually 4,901 more murders in 2020 than there were in 2019. 4,901 more murders, more homicides in 2020 than in 2019. A 30% increase. That is a big number. And the largest increase in murders happened in the city I'm living in, New York City, and in Los Angeles. New York City and Los Angeles is where the murder rate drastically went up. It went up throughout the entire country, but there was a huge increase in homicide in this city I'm sitting in and in Los Angeles. So that's where the biggest increases are. Quite an interesting statistic. Now, the FBI did not comment on why the murder rate has significantly increased in the United States, but it's been gradually ratcheting up over the last few years. But 2019, 30% increase. It shot up. It very much increased in 2020. Of course, people look on, they say the pandemic, unemployment, also people being stuck at home, in lockdown. They say the idle brain is the devil's playground. People were stuck at home, people are unemployed, there's been an increase in criminal enterprises when the above-ground economy shuts down. The underground economy increases, and the underground economy is notorious for the fact that drug lords and other criminal organizations tend to enforce their will with murder. Murder is on the rise in the United States of America. And it's yet another sign of our capitalist system being in a state of complete decay. But it gets better. It gets even better. Even better. Because recently, a very famous attempted murderer was granted full release. A very famous attempted murderer who was not convicted of attempted murder, John Hinckley, the man who shot Ronald Reagan but failed to kill him. John Hinckley has been released of all restrictions. John Hinckley shot Ronald Reagan in 1981. The story is that John Hinckley was trying to impress the actress Jodie Foster, who he was very much obsessed with. He thought that Jodie Foster would notice him if he attempted to kill the President of the United States. And John Hinckley, about a year ago, they let him have his own YouTube channel. And so on his YouTube channel, he played his guitar some. But now, John Hinckley is free. All the restrictions are released. He's actually allowed at this point to speak to the Reagan family and speak to the Jodie Foster family. And he plans to give an official apology to the family of Jodie Foster for killing Ronald Reagan. He's allowed, all the restrictions are released. It used to be, so what happened? 1981, at the AFL-CIO convention, John Hinckley shot Ronald Reagan. Didn't kill him. Ronald Reagan survived. And then John Hinckley was put on trial for attempted murder of the President of the United States, and he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And so he was put in a mental hospital. For years, he was in this mental hospital. And then he was released from the mental hospital with heavy restrictions. About a year ago, they allowed him to have his own YouTube channel, but he wasn't allowed to talk about politics. He wasn't allowed to answer any questions. All he could do was play his guitar. Well, now John Hinckley, everything's been restricted. He's going to be monitored for the next 6 months, but he's pretty much off the hook at this point. Apparently, he's been working at an antique store. And you look at John Hinckley, the man who attempted to kill Ronald Reagan. And I gotta tell you, I am at the point where I refuse to be naive anymore. The story we're told is this was just a mentally ill young man, a failed songwriter and song artist who struggled with schizophrenia. And so he wanted to impress the actress Jodie Foster. So he went and tried to kill the president in order to get Jodie Foster's attention. I don't buy it. I hate to be, the label for people like me that say, no, there's something else going on here. The label for us is they call us conspiracy theorists. And I don't want to get too far into the conspiracy universe. After anything happens in the United States, they immediately declare it to be a false flag. It didn't happen. It was all staged, crisis actors, etc. We don't want to get too far into the conspiracy rabbit hole. Because what they've really effectively done in the United States is that they've created a light switch, a light switch effect, where you believe exactly what the mainstream media says, or click, you're in crazy land, right? Crisis actors, space aliens, lizard people. And that by doing that, they kind of are able to suppress conversation because there are many, quote unquote, conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. For example, the US government told us it was a fact. They knew for a fact that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. It was undisputed. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. They had the pictures. It was all over CNN. It was true. We were told Colin Powell was showing pictures at the UN. It was totally true. The CIA said it was true. George W. Bush, the president of the United States, said it was true. Hillary Clinton, she said it was true. All kinds of people. Joe Biden said it was true. All of mainstream media said that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. That is a fact. If you don't believe that, you're a wingnut. You're insane. And then we found out that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction. Mainstream media lied. So often there are things that seem to be untrue that turn out to actually be true. The Jeffrey Epstein case. You look at Jeffrey Epstein and his underage sex ring. You look at the details of that. That sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory. It sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory. But it's all true. It's all true. Look at the Jeffrey Epstein case. Look at the blatant facts about Jeffrey Epstein, his sex ring, his island. Look at all the facts of that case. All the things that everyone acknowledges to be true. It sounds like something out of a Hollywood conspiracy theory, horror movie, something like that. It's all true. But by creating this light switch effect, where either you accept what mainstream media says, or click, you're in crazy land, they're able to control the narrative. They're able to control the discussion. Jeffrey Epstein really did what he's understood to have done. His death was very mysterious, but put his death aside. He really did a lot of awful things. Those weapons of mass destruction did not exist in Iraq. They really weren't there. Just saying. So, when I look at John Hinckley and his attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, I think something's going on. Let me tell you a couple facts about John Hinckley's assassination of Ronald Reagan, attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. Fact number one, John Hinckley's father was a wealthy oil company capitalist. Did you know that? John Hinckley's dad was a wealthy oil banking, oil tycoon, oil money fellow from Texas. Did you know that? Yeah. The father of this guy who just happened to almost kill the president of the United States, his father was an oil millionaire from Texas. And who was the vice president who would have become president if Ronald Reagan had died? George Herbert Walker Bush. And what was George Herbert Walker Bush? He was a wealthy oil company owner from Texas, originally from Connecticut, but owned a lot of oil in Texas. He was a Texas oil man. What are the chances that the President of the United States is shot by the son of a Texas oil man, and the guy who's about to become president is also a Texas oil man. Oh, and let me add, as many people in the chat have already pointed out, that George Herbert Walker Bush had also been the CIA director. The CIA director. So what are you start looking into this case. And then on top of that, okay? Ronald Reagan was a very popular president. They called it the Reagan Revolution. Ronald Reagan took office in 1981. He gets elected. He's sworn in. And just a couple months after he takes office, a group that's not so fond of Ronald Reagan, called the AFL-CIO, labor unions, are having their convention. Ronald Reagan speaks at the labor union convention. And he's then shot. And so the person who shot him is taken to court, charged with attempting to kill the President of the United States, and found not guilty. Do you know what the conviction rate is in federal courts, my friends? The conviction rate at jury trials in the United States is astronomically high, right? If you go to trial in the United States, 99% of cases never go to trial. But if you go to trial in the United States, the conviction rate is very high. And in federal courts, it is much higher than in regular courts. Juries in the United States find you guilty. They find you guilty. Federal juries in the United States almost always find you guilty. Nobody gets acquitted in federal court. Acquittals in federal court are very, very rare. But somehow, circumstances and a trial took place. And a man who attempted to kill and successfully shot and put in the hospital the President of the United States was somehow found not guilty by reason of insanity. So rather than going to a prison, he went to a private mental hospital. Very interesting. But it gets just a little bit more interesting than that. There are some other details there. For example, John Hinckley took with him, at the time of his murder, a copy of his favorite book, Catcher in the Rye. Anyone ever read Catcher in the Rye? Holden Caulfield? This kind of stream of consciousness novel by R.D. Salinger. Yes, Jodie Foster. That was supposedly what it was, that he was trying to impress Jodie Foster. But for some reason, he just happened to bring along his copy of his favorite book. His favorite book, which was called Catcher in the Rye. That's a little strange, right? Oh, you're going to go try and kill the president. Why not bring with you a copy of your favorite book? And so he brought with him his favorite book, Catcher in the Rye. And it just so happens, about a year earlier, not even a year earlier, a couple months prior to this, not even that long beforehand, there was another assassination that took place in the United States. The assassination of John Lennon. And the killer of John Lennon, the man who shot John Lennon, also happened to bring with him his favorite book, Catcher in the Rye. And again, is this what you do when you're about to go commit an assassination? I know. I'm going to go get my favorite book, and I'm going to bring it along with me. Just because. Is that what you do? Is that what assassins do? But yes, both the assassin of John Lennon and the attempted assassin of Ronald Reagan brought with them a copy of their favorite book, Catcher in the Rye. The more you look at this case, I'm not telling you that I know what happened. And if I was to tell you that I know what happened in that case, you could cancel me. You could say he's a bullshit artist. Because anyone who tries to tell you they know for a fact what actually happened with the Hinckley attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, they're not telling you the truth. We don't know what really happened. But something's going on there. Something's going on there. Something is going on there, okay? Something's going on there. I mean, the most blatant thing you can look at is the fact that if you're rich in the United States, you can attempt to kill the president and still not go to prison and still go to a private mental health facility for the rest of your life. I mean, that's pretty big. That's pretty big. Right? I mean, it shows how much money can buy on the one hand, right? Put everything else aside. If his father had not been a Texas oil millionaire, the chances of John Hinckley not, going to prison for the rest of his life, buried under the jail, would be quite slim. However, beyond that, who his father was, who the vice president was, the interesting choice of reading material, the interesting location, all points to something going on. I would say that the fact that John Hinckley is now on his own, no restrictions, he's a free man, makes me think something's going on. Something's going on. Something's going on. And you're free to disagree with me. You're free to argue that, hey, Caleb, he was a mentally ill, rich kid who wanted some attention. He wanted the famous actress to notice him. And he really liked Jodie Foster, the actress. And he really liked Catcher in the Rye because there weren't that many books about mentally ill people back then. And he was mentally ill, and Holden Caulfield was mentally ill. And the guy who shot John Lennon was also mentally ill, and they both liked this book about mentally ill because there was no Google back then. People didn't talk about mental health, and they were just mentally ill people. And so, they were attracted to a book about a mentally ill young man. And, okay. All right. I mean, again, I can't tell you what's actually going on. I can't tell you what's actually going on with that case, but something tells me that something's off, okay? And I think something's off. When I look into the details of John Hinckley's attempted assassination, who he was, the circumstances surrounding it, I think something's going on. That's all I can say, is that I think something's going on here. I am not naive. I have lived in this world long enough to know something's probably going on there. All right? Something's going on there. We don't know what was going on there. We can only speculate that something was going on there. Something was going on there. We don't really know the details of what went on, why it went on, but something more than just rich kid, with a failed songwriting career, has a meltdown and starts shooting. Something was going on. All right? Something was going on. And that's what we know. And also, I will tell you, there's another attempted assassination that was less than a decade prior to that, where there's also something else going on. And that was Sarah Jane Moore. Sarah Jane Moore tried to kill the president of the United States, Gerald Ford. Like John Hinckley, she failed. She didn't actually shoot him. I don't think Gerald Ford went to the hospital. I think she missed. But Sarah Jane Moore, and you look at the details of the Sarah Jane Moore case, that's pretty weird also. You look at that case, something's going on. We don't know exactly what was going on, but something was going on if you look at the details of Sarah Jane Moore. Who is Sarah Jane Moore? And yes, Kinky, we'll talk about Squeaky Fromm after this. That one's a little more plausible. That one I think, but we'll talk about that after we talk about Sarah Jane Moore. So Sarah Jane Moore was an FBI informant. And this is fact, okay? This is not conspiracy. She herself was an FBI informant. The FBI admits that she was this. Back in the 1970s, there was a left adventurous terrorist organization called the Symbionese Liberation Army. They kidnapped a woman named Patty Hearst, a very famous heiress. And in exchange for Patty Hearst's return, they demanded that the Hearst family give free food away to low-income African Americans. Very famous case. So in order to get their daughter back, this rich family is giving out turkeys and free food. Books on Maoism. They're giving away turkeys and free food. And there's various people that are volunteering to help give some of this free food away. Well, the FBI is trying to figure out who the terrorists are, trying to figure out how to catch them. So they sent Sarah Jane Moore to go infiltrate the people giving the free food away. And so Sarah Jane Moore, a young FBI informant, went and infiltrated the people giving free food away. And then, after she'd been doing this for a little bit, she made friends with the various radicals that were distributing the food. The story is, she became more radical and revolutionary or whatever. So she gave a press conference. Yes, a press conference. She gave a press conference and announced to the media that I, Sarah Jane Moore, am an FBI informant. And she gave a press conference to everybody and announced, hey, just so everybody knows, I'm an FBI informant, and the FBI has been spying on radicals, and that's totally bad. So she gave a press conference announcing to everyone that she was an FBI informant. At the time, the FBI wouldn't confirm it. Later, they did admit that, yes, Sarah Jane Moore had been an FBI informant. But she gave this press conference just announcing to the media, just so everybody knows, I'm an FBI informant, and the FBI is spying on left-wing and radical groups. So she gives this press conference. And that in itself is a little bit sketch. Why does she do that? And then, after she gave her press conference announcing that she'd been an FBI informant, she then attempted to kill the President of the United States. Again, sketch. Something might be going on there, but it gets better. Sarah Jane Moore got out of jail. She broke out of jail. She escaped from federal prison in 1979. She escaped. She had like an 8-hour escape from prison. Again, how often do people break out of federal prisons in the United States? Not much, but she got out. She got out. It was something like a Hollywood movie. She broke out of jail. They caught her again. 1979. They caught her again. But then, in 2007, as George W. Bush was getting ready to leave office, was getting ready for the 2008 election, they let her out of jail. They let her out of jail. They let Sarah Jane Moore out of jail. Even though she had attempted to kill the President of the United States, even though she'd escaped, which is in and of itself is a crime. You get more time for escaping. Did you know that? That's generally how these things work. You get more time when you escape. That's part of the reason they try to deter people from trying to escape, is because if you break out of prison and then they catch you again, then you go back and your sentence is extended because you broke out of jail. But Sarah Jane Moore, 2007 rolls around, and Sarah Jane Moore gets released from federal prison. And they let her out. And it gets better. In federal prison, Sarah Jane Moore talks about how the fact that she is Jewish. Her religion is that she's Jewish. And she talks about how the Jewish community, she says, has turned its back on Jews in prisons. She says there are services for Christians in prison, there are services for Muslims in prison, There are even services for more obscure religious faiths in prison, but she calls out the Jewish community for not having enough services for Jews in prison. She said the Jewish community is embarrassed of Jews in prison, so there's not services for Jews in prison. She's giving interviews, basically calling out the Jewish community for not giving enough support to Jews in prison. She gets out of prison, 2007. She goes on the Today Show. She went on the Today Show. Do you remember the Today Show? Matt Lauer? She went on the Today Show. And on the Today Show, on national television, before millions of viewers, Sarah Jane Moore announces to everybody she's glad she didn't succeed in killing the President of the United States. She's really glad she didn't succeed. She's glad she failed, but she doesn't regret trying. She doesn't regret what? So she's on parole from federal prison. And she goes on national television. She's granted special permission to go on national television by the parole board. She goes on national television and she says, I'm glad I failed, but I don't regret trying. Is this starting to get weird to you? And then, icing on the cake, she's on parole. When you're on parole, there's a lot of things you can't do. You have to have a certain type of job. You have to check in with your parole officer. You can't leave the state, usually. Well, Sarah Jane Moore was on parole, out of jail from having killed the President of the United States. Not only did she leave the state without permission, she left the country without permission. She went to Israel without telling her parole officer. Sarah Jane Moore, after she was out of prison for having tried to kill the President of the United States, on parole, took an international trip to Israel without telling her parole officer. Without telling her parole officer, she went to Israel, hung out in Israel for a little bit, got on a plane, came back to the United States, and then went back to prison for like a year because it's illegal to go out of the country when you're on parole. Now, are you looking at this Sarah Jane Moore case and saying, seems to me like there's something going on here? That's what I'm thinking. When I look at the Sarah Jane Moore case, and I look at Sarah Jane Moore and these circumstances, again, I'm not telling you that I know what's going on. I'm not telling you that I know what's going on, because I don't. I mean, you look at the case. I'm just telling you, based on all of those facts I just told you, something's going on. I don't know what it is that's going on, but something is going on. If you want to look at that and just say, well, crazy lady was an FBI informant, crazy lady tried to kill the president, crazy lady was in jail, crazy lady broke out of jail, crazy lady, after she got out of jail, no. I'm sorry. I look at all those details. Crazy lady gets out of jail. Crazy lady takes illegal trip to Israel. Crazy lady comes back from Israel. Crazy lady goes back to jail. Something's going on there, folks. Something's going on there. Just like with the Hinckley thing. Something's going on there. I don't know what it is that's going on there, but something is definitely going on there. This is too weird. And it's the same with Hinckley. It's too darn weird. It is too darn weird, okay? Again, it's just too weird. It is just too darn weird. Now, Kinky in the chat referenced the other person who tried to kill Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was president of the United States. President of the United States, and there was a second attempt on his life by Squeaky Fromm, Lynette Squeaky Fromm, the red-haired follower of Charles Manson. She also tried to kill him. That one's not his sketch. I'll be honest. I look at that one and I say, okay, that could just be, Now, we know about Charles Manson. There's a whole book written about Charles Manson and MK Ultra and all of that. But putting the Charles Manson thing aside, this woman was a follower of Charles Manson, was in love with Charles Manson. Charles Manson was in prison, and she was not well. She apparently went and tried to visit Led Zeppelin, the rock band. She tried to, talk to Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, and she couldn't deliver her note to Jimmy Page. She wanted to talk to Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page was not available. She knocked on the hotel door room or something, was trying to get a hold of Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. When she couldn't reach Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, she walked up to Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was having a press event. She walked up to Gerald Ford. She took her gun out, and then the Secret Service tackled her. There you go. I mean, that one makes me think that this was a woman who was a follower of Charles Manson. She was not well. She was, that one I can believe. I can believe that Lynette Squeaky Fromm acted alone. I can buy that. I can buy Lynette Squeaky Fromm acted alone. That makes sense to me. That one I can buy. But Sarah Jane Moore, something's going on there. John Hinckley, something's going on there. And the Kennedy assassination. Again, the Kennedy assassination, right? Just a quick rundown of the facts. John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, goes to Dallas, and he's going to have a parade in an open car. The parade route is printed in the newspapers going one way. However, they decide, for security reasons, to take the parade another way. Just so happens the way that they change the parade is to go by a company called the Book Depository. And they're just going to go by the Book Depository. Just so happens there's a guy at the Book Depository who has a rifle, and his name is Lee Harvey Oswald. And then Lee Harvey Oswald, they tell us, must have been the best shot in the world because he managed, despite the distance, and it was a really impossible shooting. He managed to kill the President of the United States. But then, after Lee Harvey Oswald killed the President of the United States, they were transferring him from one jail to another, and then somebody else walked up to him and shot him on national television. Jack Ruby then shot Lee Harvey Oswald on national television. Something's going on there. And the guy who shot Lee Harvey Oswald happened to have a brain tumor. And just died 6 months later from his brain tumor. At the time, he already had this brain tumor. Something's going on there. Something's going on there, folks. Something's going on there. Something's going on there. Again, we can theorize, we can speculate about what might have been going on, but something's going on there. So when I see the spike in murder, when I see that John Hinckley has now got all of his restrictions lifted, I've got a feeling that something is going on there. And I encourage critical thinking. You're not supposed to think anymore. Did you know that, folks? Did you get the memo? You're not supposed to think anymore. You're not supposed to think anymore. Nowadays, you're supposed to have a block in your mind. And I see this when bread tubers react to me. You're supposed to have this block in your mind that if anyone has a dissident concept or a dissident idea, you're supposed to immediately go, must not think. You're supposed to have a self-censorship, that whenever anyone uses a certain phrase, whenever anyone says anything like false flag or says something about U.S. media lying, you're supposed to go, must not think. That makes me dissident. That makes me thought criminal. Must not think. Well, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to develop a phobia of thinking. I really don't want you to develop a phobia of thinking. Left lost, Germany gained. All right. Left lost, Greens gained, Germany. I don't want you to develop a phobia of thinking. I do not want you to develop a phobia of thinking. I want you to look at cases like John Hinckley, Sarah Jane Moore, and realize that there are, the assassination of Kennedy, there are bigger forces at work here. That within the U.S. ruling class, there are different factions. Within the American state apparatus, the FBI, the CIA, the Pentagon, there are different factions. There are struggles and contradictions within the ruling class. I want you to think about these things. I want you to think about these things. And if you're going to be a serious Marxist, you need to think about these things. And so that's how I thought I would open my live for this afternoon. I'm just telling you, I encourage you to think about these things and ask questions. And I encourage you to recognize that when capitalism enters a state of crisis, the rate of profit drops and the contradictions among those who own the banks and the factories and the major centers of economic power, when those differences, when they become more intense in a time of economic crisis, the capitalists fight among each other and tries to seize control of the government. And the contradictions among the ruling class are very important for those of us who want to get beyond capitalism and establish socialism to understand. It's very important for us to understand the contradictions within the ruling class. Assuming that all the capitalists are all on the same team is naive. There are divisions in the ruling class, and I want you to think about those things. And I want you to look at events that take place and be aware. And I just want to add, since we're on the topic of murder, since we're on the topic of murder, our vice president, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the vice president of the United States is another John Hinckley and is another Sarah Jane Moore. Kamala Harris is an attempted murderer. Let me repeat that. Kamala Harris is an attempted murderer. There was a man on death row in the state of California, and she tried to block evidence that would acquit him. This is a fact. She has told the press she, quote, feels bad about it. Well, she feels bad about it. But Kamala Harris was a prosecutor in California. She became the California State Attorney General. And when she was the prosecutor in California, there was a man, an African-American man, who was on death row, was facing death by lethal injection. And Kamala was so excited to fry a bastard. She was so excited at the idea that she could put someone to death. She could have someone killed. She was so elated. It excited her and thrilled her so much, the idea that she could fry a bastard, that she was so close to frying a bastard, because they don't execute people in California very much. They have the death penalty in California, but they don't use it very much. And she could actually get the chance to kill somebody. And she was so excited. And there was this evidence that showed he might not have done it. And so she did her best. Can we just hide that evidence? Can we not include that? She tried to block evidence that would have acquitted or prevented the execution of someone. She tried to block the evidence because she was so excited about the possibility of killing someone. Luckily, the governor of California was far more ethical and moral than Kamala Harris was. And the governor of California said, no, I want to look at all the evidence, and that person did not get the death penalty. Now, when you look at the details of that case, that alone should make it abundantly obvious that Kamala Harris is not fit to be president or vice president of the United States. That little detail alone, that one incident, should be enough to say, you know, there's a lot of qualified applicants for the job. But no. But no. And that, folks, is very, very disturbing to me. Kamala Harris, read my book on Kamala Harris. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That is just the tip of the iceberg. Kamala Harris is a special kind of evil. She's a special kind of evil. I wrote an entire book about why. All right. Labor shortage. Kamala Harris is a special kind of evil. She is a special kind of evil. Go read my book on her. We should be very, very worried about Kamala Harris becoming president of the United States. So on that note, folks, I'm done with my opening remarks. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Please hit the notifications bell. Hit the notifications bell, hit the like button. You know, we watch world events go by. Names and locations, folks. I'll call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Smash the like button. Raphael in Brazil. Alan in Chicago. Ben in Suffolk County. Dylan Small in California. Arturo in Alaska. Lucha in Mississippi. Leipzig, East Germany. St. Louis. Christian, Northern New Jersey. Meredith Quinn in Washington. Temple City, California. Danny from Illinois. Sam from Australia. Flushing. St. David's, West Virginia. Micah in Las Vegas. Ryan in Oakland. Ron in California. New York, New Jersey. Pasta Bazooka. Wisconsin. Ireland. Kim in New Jersey. Zach in Seattle. Ontario. Minnesota. Mexico. Carolyn in Brooklyn in memory of Tamara. Kendall in San Diego, Northern Michigan, Max in Northern Virginia, Joshua Tree, California. Shout out to you, Kinky, always a loved member of our community. Montreal, Chaya, another loved member of our community. KCMO, Kansas City, Missouri. William Kane in Gateshead, England. Los Angeles, California. Mo in Toronto, the Bay of Pigs. Jay in Sweden. Jenny Lynn, shout out to you in Cincinnati, Ohio. Joe from Philadelphia. Daniel from Norway. Pomona, California, Ireland, France, Ash in Chicago, St. George, Utah, Dario with Tamara in his heart from Brooklyn, shout out to you, Cleveland Pirate Alex, Poitiers, France, Sam Scheller in San Diego County, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Sweden, St. Louis, Mohsen from Iran, Mark in Aberdeen, Scotland, I'm in the apartments of justice, says Saeed. Joe near Chicago, Cambridge, UK. B-Level in Canada, shout out to you, and I think you could be a mod. All right. Ben from Chicago, Kieran from San Diego, Steve from Southwest Michigan, Naples, Florida, Stephen in Riverside County, Truly Global, Billings, Montana, New Russia, Lisa from New Russia, Daniel in Seattle, Southern California, Teddy, Scotland, Mexico, Split Seconds, Ya Claire. Very good. Very, 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 very good. All right, folks, West Virginia, Honolulu, Lewis from Edinburgh, Scotland. Very, 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 very good. All right, a couple business notes to just throw out while we're chatting here. Business item number one, shout out to the John Brown volunteers. They are doing tremendous work. Yesterday, there was an event in New York City for the foreign minister of Nicaragua, Denis Moncada. Denis Moncada, the foreign minister of Nicaragua, spoke at a church in New York City. And the John Brown volunteers were there, and the right wing attempted to disrupt this event, and the John Brown volunteers ran him out. They ran him out. They ran him out of the church. You should watch the video. Max Blumenthal attended and showed the video. You can see me in the video. You can see a couple of the John Brown volunteers in the video of us running the right-wingers out of the church. Run them out. Run them out. Run them out. And there's a video on this channel. They did a great job, all of them. I love the John Brown volunteers. They're great folks. Watch the video of how they intervened at this church service with the Nicaraguan foreign minister. Share that video around. It was epic. It was really, really something. We presented the Nicaraguan foreign minister with a copy. It is on this channel. It's the latest video. With a copy of our new book, Jesus is a Socialist. It was presented to the Nicaraguan foreign minister. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. The government of Nicaragua is facing increasing attack. We expect this November that the elections there will be, U.S. media will do everything they can to try and use the circumstances surrounding the upcoming elections to destabilize Nicaragua. The Sandinistas and the socialist government of Nicaragua need all our support, all the support possible. But yes, it was quite an exciting Sunday. Quite an exciting Sunday in New York City. So I wanted to just mention that. And like I said at the opening of this live, the second half of the show, which we are now entering, at the sound of the tone, it will be the second half of this show. Bong! At the sound of the tone, it will be the second half of the show. Bong! The second half of the show, which we are now entering, is all me answering your super chat questions. So send some super chat questions. Send some super chat questions, and I will answer them. The first super chat question I got was redlining. And redlining refers to the fact that there were racially discriminatory policies in mortgage lending by banks that basically, to get a mortgage loan for your home, as the Roosevelt administration was helping to increase home ownership in the United States as one of their stimulus policies, many banks had a policy called redlining. They would draw a line on a map, and if you lived on one side of the line, right, Xi Jinping, Cole, Evergrande, if you lived on one side of the line, you could get the loan. If you lived on another side of the line, you could not get the loan. And that was a racially discriminatory policy. And that is largely responsible for the fact that after the Second World War, very few African-American families were able to purchase their own homes, right? The white picket fence in the suburbs, all of that was for white people. And there were many black families that could afford such a home, and would have gotten a mortgage if they had been white. But because they lived on one side of the line, they were not able to get the mortgage loan. And as a result of that, the rate of wealth that has been passed on to through the generations, for white people, it is significantly greater because white people had a vast increase in home ownership following the Second World War, and black people did not because of this racist policy called redlining. Interesting fact, after the 2008 financial crisis, the right wing, instead of talking about why the mortgage crisis happened, claimed, it was all over right-wing media, that the financial crisis had happened because banks were, quote, forced to lend to people who couldn't afford it. Because in the 70s, redlining and racially discriminatory policies in lending money were outlawed. And so the right wing said, the reason the financial crisis happened is because the government forced us to lend money to black people who couldn't afford to, and that was a big lie. And it shows you how they will never miss an opportunity to lie. But yeah, that was all over right-wing media. They claimed that the financial crisis of 2008, 2009 happened because of the ban on redlining. If only we were allowed to just lend to people who we wanted to, but the government made us lend. That's not true. There were bans in the 70s enacted against policies like redlining, where banks wouldn't give people mortgage loans because they lived on the black side of town. And that has, those policies are illegal now. And so the right wing tried to blame the financial crisis of 2008, 2009 on that. The reason that the housing bubble burst in 2008, 2009, right? USSR, military interventions. The reason that the housing bubble burst was because Americans couldn't afford to keep buying homes. The living standards in the United States were dropping. The wages of average American workers have been going down. The industrial jobs, the good-paying industrial jobs, have been eliminated. The rate of household debt has vastly gone up, and Americans simply couldn't afford to keep buying homes at the rate that they had always been buying them. And as a result of that, you had Alan Greenspan trying his hardest to keep Americans spending money. After 9/11, George W. Bush told the American people, if you want to help defeat Al-Qaeda, you must go shopping. You need to go shopping to defeat Al-Qaeda. And they were desperate, right? There was a financial downturn in the 2000s, in the year 2000, there was a financial downturn. And after 9/11, George W. Bush begged the American public to go shopping. Go shopping. Go shopping. And so the American public, the American public did go shopping, but they couldn't afford to keep spending. So Alan Greenspan legalized all kinds of lending practices that had previously been illegal. Alan Greenspan was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he worked with the U.S. Congress to deregulate the lending of money so that there could be more credit handed out to the American people so they could keep spending money. And so Americans kept buying homes, but the loans that they had to buy these homes were insane loans, right? That had all kinds of policies, and they were what they call predatory lending. They were loans where if you miss one payment, all of a sudden you have to pay 3 times the mortgage rate, or you lose your home. It was all kinds of, they talked about, all kinds of insane loan policies, predatory loans that. After those loans, people weren't paying them back, the housing bubble burst. It has nothing to do with anti-racist policies, right? It has nothing to do with that. The policies that ban racial discrimination and redlining and lending had nothing to do with it. And the fact that the right wing would go there just shows how vicious they are, how ideological they are. Everything's because of the government. Libertarians are unbelievably awful. But redlining, yes, again, a lot of misinformation about it from the right wing. But no, what it really was that basically it was a policy that has significantly hurt African Americans and other non-white communities in the United States historically. It was outlawed in the 70s, and the right wing wants it re-legalized. And it's not a good policy, right? Every individual should be approached on a case-by-case basis. And personally, I think there should be a state monopoly on the lending of money. It should be the government that determines how money is and credit is assigned. I don't think it should be in the hands of private corporations, right? We need central planning. We need socialism. All right, next question. What do I think of Francis Fukuyama? Well, Francis Fukuyama was an intellectual who was very famous after the fall of the Soviet Union for arguing in Hegelian terms that we had entered the end of history. He argued, right? So if you understand Marxism argues that history is moving forward, and that history is moving forward driven by contradiction, right? And that there is a thesis, there is an antithesis, and they clash and they create a synthesis. And then that synthesis becomes a new thesis, and it clashes with an antithesis, creating thus a new synthesis that then becomes a thesis. This is how these things are done, right? This is the Hegelian dialectic. Francis Fukuyama pulled from Marx this concept of the end of history, right? That Marx argued that once full communism had been achieved, there would no more be any class struggle. In a state of vast material abundance, so much stuff and so much wealth existing, that there is no real need for inequality. No one needs to hoard, no need for a state. That society functions upon the basis of each according to their own ability, to each according to their needs. In such a context, that would be the end of class struggle. And Marx used the phrase, the end of history, meaning that there would no longer be a history. Now, many Marxists have argued that technically, end of history isn't exactly the best term, because obviously time would keep going. Obviously human beings would keep advancing and doing new things, but history as we know it, history as class struggle, advancing to higher modes of production, would end at that point. The economic contradiction would end. Man, as Frederick Engels puts it, would at last be the master over nature, free, right? That was the argument. So Francis Fukuyama argued that Marx was right, except the end of history was achieved not by communism, but by capitalism. That the economic boom of the 1990s and the fall of the Soviet Union had proved that capitalism had achieved the end of history, not communism. That the end of history had been achieved, the final system of profits in command, capitalism. Capitalism was the final synthesis of economics and class struggle. And it was an attempt to use the Marxian philosophical views to argue in favor of capitalism, and that the unipolar world of the United States, the domination of the world by the United States, and the imposition of neoliberalism, the open society advocated by George Soros, that the open society was the final stage of human history, that we would advance, we would just continue to have more and more open societies and more free markets, and it would lead to vast prosperity and abundance, and you don't need communism, but it was capitalism that brings about the end of history. That was Francis Fukuyama's argument, and he could never have been more wrong. If you look at how things have gone down since the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of Russia and China, Bolivarian socialism in Latin America, he was wrong. Oopsie poopsie. Wah, wah, wah. He screwed up on that one. And that's Francis Fukuyama. Strange day, but lovely weather. Next question. Would it be the responsibility of a socialist government to teach virtue to the population? Yes. I argue that the state has an obligation to improve the population. Right? To serve the people doesn't just mean giving them stuff, but it means making them better. It means raising the cultural level. It means enhancing and advancing civilization. The role of the artist historically has been to make the audience better, educating them, teaching them something, lifting them up. Part of the problem with capitalism is that art and sciences, since they are reduced to mere financial profit-making enterprises, don't make people better. In fact, they go to the lowest common denominator. They find something that is guaranteed to make a return on the investment of the capitalists who are paying for it. And that is a problem. The job of the state is to find artists and scientists and educators and make the population better, to improve the population. That is a necessity on the part of the state. The government has a responsibility to do such a thing. And such a thing, that was the feeling of Roosevelt, and that was the feeling of Vannevar Bush and various intellectuals associated with the Roosevelt administration. That used to just be common sense, right? That the government has an obligation to improve the lives of the people. That was common sense at one point. It is not anymore. Now we believe in neoliberalism. We believe in free markets. We believe in left anti-totalitarianism. No, the government should leave us alone. We should have no obligation to society. Everyone on their own. Everyone a free individual. No ideology. No prevailing narrative. No duty to society. No obligation to your family. No central planning of the economy. Everyone trying to make as much profits for themselves, everyone doing whatever they feel like doing, no central vision, no ideology, atomized individuals on their own doing whatever they want. That is the basis of the liberal order, the open society. And the liberal order argues that everyone's on their own, both socially and economically. And that is rules-based. All right. And that is the liberal narrative, and it has largely failed. And if you look at the increasing murder rate that I talked about, the increasing suicide rate, the increasing economic and political confusion that is sweeping the West, it is a result of this kind of thinking. Human beings define themselves in relation to other people. The way you think of yourself is entirely dependent on other people. If you were alone on an island all by yourself, you would have no sense of self. The way human beings define themselves is through how they relate to other people. And if you take that away, if everyone is on their own, the result is going to be some big confusion. So there you go. Next point, books on Maoism and Mao Zedong thought. Roosevelt, isolationist. Books on Maoism and Mao Zedong thought. Liberal versus leftist. Well, books on Mao Zedong thought. Well, see, the thing is, you have to come at this from many different angles, okay? So if you're looking for like a history of Maoist political movements, there's a very good book. I mean, it's a kind of an introductory book. It's called A History of Trotskyism and Maoism in France and the United States. It was published in the 1980s, I believe, but it goes over the evolution of the Maoist communist groups and the Trotskyite communist groups, American exceptionalism. It goes over the history of the Maoist communist groups and the Trotskyite communist groups during the 1960s and 70s. So if you're looking for a history of the, woke McCarthyism, if you're looking for a history of those movements, I would recommend starting there. Now, Maoism as a political current, right? You can obviously always read Mao's writings, right, which are available. The Chinese government has published them. You can read biographies of Mao. A good place to start would be Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow. That's considered one of the most important books on Chinese communism. It was the first interview. The first interview that Mao ever gave was to an American journalist from Missouri named Edgar Snow. And Edgar Snow, this American journalist from Missouri, interviewed Mao Zedong, and he wrote a book that was like a biography of Mao, but also a portrait of Mao's peasant army in 1937, and it's called Red Star Over China. Also, there was an Chinese-American woman named Han Suyin. She wrote a romance novel called Love is a Many Splendored Thing, and she, after the Chinese Revolution, became an enthusiastic admirer of Mao, and she wrote a two-part biography of Mao. She wrote Wind in the Tower, which was a biography of Mao and his leadership of China, and she wrote The Morning Deluge, which was a biography of Mao's childhood up until the time that he led the Chinese Revolution. So if you want to learn about who Mao was, those are all good places to start. Mao's actual writings, Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow, Wind in the Tower and The Morning Deluge by Han Suyin. Those are all great places to start. Agnes Smedley was an American writer who went and embedded herself in the Red Army. You can read her writings. She wrote China's Red Army Marches. She was in love with Chu Tai, who was a leader of the Chinese military. You can read all about Mao and the peasant army, etc. And if you read Agnes Smedley's autobiographies, she was kind of a Freudian feminist based in the United States who had worked for Indian independence and eventually became sympathetic to the Chinese Revolution. So those are all good background material on Mao himself. Now, if you're looking for a history of Mao the movement, Maoism as a movement, the Maoist political current, I would recommend, you can start with the history of Trotskyism and Maoism in France and the United States. That's a good place to start. There's also then you would want to study the history of the what they call the New Communist Movement, the NCM, and that was in the 1970s. There were a number of individuals in the United States, tens of thousands of people in the United States who wanted to build a new communist party that was aligned with China. And you can read Revolution in the Air by Max Elbaum, which is a history of the various communist groups in the 1970s, the new communist movement. It's called Revolution in the Air. 60s radicals turned to Lenin, Mao, and Che. It's a history of the new communist movement. You can then read Heavy Radicals. You can read Heavy Radicals, which is a history of the Revolutionary Union and the Revolutionary Communist Party in the 1970s. The FBI's war on America's Maoists, how the FBI went after them and infiltrated them. If you want to read about Maoist groups in Detroit, you can read Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, which is a very good book about the history of African-American Maoist communists who worked in Detroit in the auto plants, built the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement. That's a very good history if you want to learn about Maoist groups, that how they operated, in Detroit during the 1970s and how they had a lot of influence. That's a good place to start. Those are all a great place to start. Now, I think the question was asked more specifically about the difference between Maoism and Mao Zedong thought. And I think they're referring to, there is a political current, a very obscure, small political current called MLM, Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. And those are generally individuals that are aligned with the shining path of Peru and with the Naxals of India. And that is an ultra-leftist deviation. Many groups around the world that are inspired by the Chinese Revolution don't adhere to this, right? In India, for example, there's a huge political party called the Socialist Unity Center of India. It's huge, right? Hundreds of thousands of people are in it. They have Mao's picture everywhere, but they have nothing to do with the Naxals. There's another party in India called the Communist Party of India, Marxist. And they actually control an entire region in India. They control the region of Kerala, and they are a Maoist party that was aligned with China. They have nothing to do with MLM or Gonzalo or Naxals, okay? In Germany, there's a very big party that it comes out of the Maoist tradition. It's called the Marxist-Leninist Party of Germany, MLPD, Marxist-Leninist Party Deutschland. MLPD, again, Maoist party, has nothing to do with these wackos, MLM is a very obscure interpretation. Marxism, Leninism, Maoism is an obscure interpretation that argues that China became capitalist after Mao died in 1976. It supports the Gang of Four, which were an ultra-leftist clique led by Mao's wife that tortured people and made life a living hell for a lot of people in China, and hurt China's economy. And then on top of that, they tend to fetishize violence. The MLM current, they tend to fetishize violence, right? They don't really understand economics. They don't really understand dialectical and historical materialism. For them, it's all about violence. They love guns, they love guerrilla warfare, they love killing, they're LARPing, they're running around, and MLM is it's an ultra-leftist current, right? It's a ultra-leftist fetishization of violence, etc. They tend to hate every socialist country that exists currently. They tend to only support the only communist groups internationally they even support tend to be the group, the Shining Path in Peru, the Naxals in India, and some of the Maoists in the Philippines maybe. And that's it. And it's got nothing to do with our idea. It's Blanquism. If you really want to get down to it, it's the ideology of Blanquism. It's all about the state, right? They see state power, and basically, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP of Babavekian, they were better in the 70s, but they've degenerated into this over the years. All right, MLK, that's true. Right? They've degenerated into this over the years. It's just, it's the state is oppressing people. The system is bad, and so when we take over, we're going to make it right. Right? No analysis of class struggle. No analysis of it's all just this obsession with guns and violence in the state. If you go, you want to know what the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, thinks, go get Basics by Babavekian, BA6, Basics, right? It's this book of quotations from Chairman Bob. And you go and read it, and it's all just, police brutality happens, the government is oppressing people, therefore we should overthrow the government, and once we're in charge, we're going to make everything right. That's it. There's no understanding of the objective laws of history. It's, again, they don't like the state, they don't like police brutality, and if they were the state, they would do a good job because they're moral, and the people running the state are immoral, and they are moral. That's kind of the argument, right? The people running the state currently are immoral. Once we take over the state, we are moral. So we got to get our guns together, and we got to take over the state. It's ultra-leftism, fetishization of violence. It has nothing to do. It's an insult to Mao, honestly, because Mao Zedong was a brilliant political organizer and leader. Mao entered strategic alliances. Mao was actually an alternate member of the National Committee of the KMT party at one point. Did you know that? Mao entered an alliance with the KMT, waged People's War in the countryside, entered an alliance with them again to fight the Japanese invaders, tried to form a coalition government with the KMT after the Second World War. Mao was a brilliant political organizer who was very, very effective. But MLM is a group of people who wank over violence. They think violence and killing is really exciting. They like Mao because Mao had a gun, and he said, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. That's badass. It's just it's an ultra-leftist current. And I think a lot of them are third worldists. A lot of them have become third worldists. And the basis of a lot of them becoming third worldists is this idea that, no one wants to have the big bloody revolution that I fantasize about all day. No one wants to have the big bloody revolution that I fantasize about all day. And so therefore, that proves that my ideology, that it will never work. And it's ridiculous. I believe one of these kooks was making the argument about his brilliant argument about why you could never have a revolution in a Western country. He said, if you handed a gun to an average American and said, go kill the bourgeoisie, they wouldn't do it. Well, this person is like a complete idiot, because if you handed a gun to anyone in any country in a non-violent revolutionary situation, they would not take it and do that. People don't want civil war. People don't want violence. People don't want killing. People don't want their communities torn up by blood. It's like ridiculous. I don't care, first world, third world, second world, whatever. You just hand a gun to somebody and say, go, and they're not going to do it. Because that's not what most human beings want. Sane and rational human beings don't do such things. Do they think that that's what Mao did? Do they think Mao went up to random people and said, here's a gun, go and kill? No, of course not. It's like beyond me. It is the dumbest argument I've ever heard, and it's like so profound. Violent revolutions only happen when people have been peacefully organizing and building up community power and mobilizing, building up their own institutions, when dual power structures have been built and the old state is threatened and the people have no choice but to defend their existing structures from the violence of the old system. Revolutions are great acts of self-defense. When violent revolutions happen, it is a desperate act of self-defense. It has nothing to do with people just going around and advocating violence. Serious revolutionary organizers never advocate violence. They recognize that there may come a time when people have no choice but to defend themselves. Abraham Lincoln had to defend the country from the slaveholders, right? The Spanish Republic had to defend itself from Francisco Franco. Hugo Chavez and Maduro have had to defend Venezuela from the imperialists. The Bolsheviks eventually had to defend the Soviets from the Kornilov reaction. Right? The Chinese Revolution had to defend itself after Chiang Kai-shek was forcing them to demobilize after the Second World War and was trying to make them give up their control over the liberated territories and end the land reform. Great revolutions in history, revolutions that actually succeed, that are violent only because the people in their millions realize they have no other choice. They have struggled in a peaceful way, built up their own institutions of power, and are then facing the violent terroristic repression of the old system. And in the face of it, they have no choice. But to defend themselves. This is the science of revolution. Go read William Z. Foster. Go read Gus Hall. Go read Marx. Go read Stalin. Go read Lenin on these questions, right? Blanquism, Punchism, left adventurism is a deviation from Marxism. Marxists, serious revolutionaries, advocate a peaceful transition, and they are constantly putting forward demands that raise the question of property. They are constantly putting forward demands, things that could be done if the property relations changed. They are constantly going to the masses and saying, this is what we're for. That is what serious revolutionaries do. They develop a program and they go to the masses and say, this is what we are for. This is what we believe in. and the things they believe in necessitate a change in property relations, peace, land, and bread. This is how serious revolutionaries operate. They put forward a program that challenges property relations. That's what serious revolutionaries do. So, yeah, there you go. Next question. All right. The left lost, the Greens gained in Germany. Well, I believe the Social Democratic Party, the SPD, is back in power now in Germany, right? They are victorious after the loss of the what do you call it? The loss of the Chancellor Merkel retired. The Christian Democratic Party, which she was the leader of, did significantly worse in the election because she was very popular, but her party was not so popular. So the SPD is back in power. But yes, De Link, the political party, has lost. But the Green Party, which is like a synthetic left kind of political party, a hippy-dippy counterculture party, they gained some. But De Linke, which is, it's more genuine social democrats largely, though there are communist factions within it. There's disagreement. De Link significantly lost. And I would actually like to defer to some German folks about why that happened. I don't know. I wasn't on the ground. I will say that Europe is shifting. Europe is moving further away from the United States. Europe is moving further away from the United States. That's very clear. That is very clear. All right. There's a labor shortage. The labor shortage that we're hearing about. Well, there's a couple layers to this. One is that throughout the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs and they couldn't get a new one. And so they transitioned to functioning as an unemployed person. They transitioned to getting by with whatever income they could scrounge together. And now, as the economy is coming back on, a lot of people are saying, why? I've already got this. I'm barely holding on with what I've got. Why do I want to go and take the risk of getting a new job only to lose it again? A lot of people don't have faith that the U.S. economy is going to fully come back on. A lot of people don't really have faith that this economy is going to fully come back on. A lot of people have adjusted to having less, right? Austerity, right? We're seeing, this has been a process since the late 70s. They have been collapsing and rolling back the domestic economy of the United States. The United States has become more and more Atlanticist. Absolutely, Olympia. Shout out to you. You're always a great, beloved member of this community. The United States has become more and more of an Atlanticist power, where the domestic, the widespread population of the country is not considered important. Instead, the country is considered to be just a trading hub and a global financial empire. We are transitioning to a post-industrial society. And the economy of the United States has been gradually phased out. And the pandemic expedited that, right? The domestic economy of the United States far more rapidly collapsed. As a result of that, there's a lot of Americans who don't fully have confidence that it's going to come back. And they have found a way to function, right? Basically, we're transitioning to a society with a lot of people that don't have a place in the economy, right? The pandemic, a lot of people were stuck at home. A lot of people were not having a paycheck and struggling to figure it all out, right? All right, wrote it down. And, now they're saying, oh no, we're going to have an economy again. And a lot of people are saying, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. And it took me a long time to be able to figure out how to survive on this barely nothing. Why should I take the risk of going and getting a full-time job again? A lot of people are in a situation, yeah. Now, Red Illuminati says there isn't a labor shortage. It's a job shortage that is relative to fast food companies, retail chains, and corporate brands that killed competitors. That's an interesting take on it. You should make a video on that, Red Illuminati. You probably have looked into this more than I have. All righty. Xi Jinping, what's he doing with coal and Evergrande? Well, look, the Chinese economy is implementing more state control in order to stabilize the economy. That's very clear, right? I mean, the situation with electricity over there and the threats from the United States, that's happening. And Xi Jinping is leading China to a new phase in its global relations as well as in its domestic relations. And, right, Evergrande, it's not going to sink the Chinese economy, but it's going to necessitate more state control, right? They've allowed the market to flourish for the benefit of the party and under the control of the party, and now they're starting to say, no, we need to have more rigid state control. There you go. USSR military interventions. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say about the USSR's military interventions. I don't know, is that a bait question? Like, I'm supposed to support them, and then that shows that I'm a hypocrite because I oppose U.S. military interventions, and that shows I'm an evil RT shill, and you got me. I have talked many times, there's many videos where I talk about why the Soviet Union intervened in Prague and Czechoslovakia in 1968. I talked about why the Soviet Union intervened in Afghanistan, right? The Afghan trap, and how, basically a neutral government on their border collapsed, and the United States forced a situation where the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan had to take power or be killed, and then immediately it started facing an onslaught, and so the Soviet Union had to defend the Afghan, government. I've talked about, 1956 in Hungary, how there was a right-wing, anti-communist uprising led by Cardinal Vincente and other anti-communists and fascist sympathizers, and how the Soviet Union felt it was necessary to send their forces there. I've talked about how there was division in these countries, in Poland and in Czechoslovakia and in Hungary and in Afghanistan. There were many people who supported the Soviet Union intervening, and there were many who opposed it, right? And there were divisions in these countries. There were some who opposed it, there were some who supported it. And these situations, again, are nuanced. They are nuanced. And I've talked about all of that. And if you just want to bait me for that, I'm talking about historical facts here. I'm talking about what the actual political differences were. But if you want to bait me, if you just want to bait me and say, he's a hypocrite, you can do that. But I have studied these situations. And in the Afghanistan situation, it was blatantly provoked. They called it the Afghan trap. And it was set up to basically force the Soviet Union into a situation where they had to intervene. In Czechoslovakia, there was infiltration of the Communist Party. Dubček came to power and was dismantling the socialist system on behalf of the West. And as a result of that, the Soviet Union was forced to go in. In Hungary in 1956, again, a situation had happened where, fascist elements were rising and had penetrated the party, and there was turmoil in the country, and the Soviet Union felt they had to go in. And I think in all of those situations, in Hungary in 1956, in Czechoslovakia in 1968, and probably even in Afghanistan, right? UBI stabilized capitalism. Even in Afghanistan, in 1979 or 78, you could argue in all of those countries that there were things the Soviets did that were wrong. And in fact, there were probably things the Soviet Union did that contributed to the situation that ultimately led to the invasion. I know in 1956, there was a lot of resentment among many Hungarians about the way the Soviet Union directed the Communist Party of Hungary. There was a feeling that the Communist Party of Hungary didn't have proper autonomy, and that because they were so dependent on the Soviet Union and its aid to rebuild them, that led to, Hungarian officials not being free to make the policy decisions that they wanted. There was suppression of the Roman Catholic Church and Hungarians who practiced Christianity, and that created a lot of resentment and pro-fascist sentiments among deeply religious folks in Hungary. Czechoslovakia, 1968, the base of the 68, Prague Spring uprising against the Soviet Union was the intellectuals. And I've talked on these lives many times about how it was very clear that layer of kind of educated folks, doctors, scientists, college professors, writers, artists, those kind of people didn't have a very good time in the Eastern Bloc. It sucked to be one of those people in the Eastern Bloc. You know, those people were suppressed. Those people were not able to go out and achieve their dreams. Their entrepreneurial aspirations were kind of suppressed. And as a result of that, they developed a huge amount of resentment against the Soviet bureaucracy. And it was hijacking that resentment that ultimately led to the downfall. And so, you know, again, you know, if they had been able to find a way to harness the creativity and the initiative of those kind of middle class and that strata, that was possible, it may not have led to that kind of situation. So there's plenty of room to criticize the way the Soviet Union conducted itself, but I think there's nothing wrong with having a real conversation about why these military interventions happened. And again, if you're just looking for ammo against me, which is the way the question was worded makes me believe that. This was just a search for ammo. You may have found it. You may find a little part you can just clip here and, oh, we got him. But I'm talking about these things in an objective way. Right? The way we're always taught, it blows my mind, whether it's Nicaragua or Venezuela or Russia or China or Korea or whatever country, we are given this narrative about how it is, right? That there's good guys and there's bad guys, there's the evil regime, there's the good people that want freedom, and it's that simple. And it's like it never occurs to anybody that there might be more to the story than that. It never occurs to anybody. Well, it occurs to me, and I hope it occurs to you. All right, next question. Keep them rolling in. The rules-based global order. That is the new talking point. Definitely not searching for ammo. Good. I'm glad to hear that, ThinkPad. I'm glad you're not, and I'm sorry that I responded the way I did. I'm just used to the hostility. Please forgive me for my hostile tone. I appreciated the question. It gave me an opportunity to talk about a lot of things. The rules-based global order. This is the new talking point of U.S. officials about their foreign policy, the rules-based global order. That's why the USA intervenes around the world. It's enforcing the rules-based global order. They won't explain what the rules are, and the second you do that, you enter hypocrisy. Right? The United States violates international law. The United States is persecuting Julian Assange. The United States is propping up the brutal Saudi autocracy that is murdering the people of Yemen. And that this rules-based global order is a ridiculous way. It's trying to say, oh, look, we want to treat everyone fair and equally. But they don't. They don't. And it's one of these terms that, again, it only works if you never acknowledge the other side of the argument. You never acknowledge the other side of the argument. If it's always just good guys versus bad guys, the old narrative that, the old way of doing it that we learned from Leo Strauss, the good guy wears the white hat, the bad guy wears a black hat, Gunsmoke, global politics. If you understand it that way, and then you can nod. Rules-based global order, that's right. Russia and China just don't follow the rules. Oh boy, Russia and China, they just don't follow the rules. I mean, if they would just follow the rules, we could have a rules-based global order. It would be so delightful, gee golly. But Russia and China don't follow the rules, and gee golly, oh boy, why are Russia and China always breaking the rules? We can't have a rules-based global order. It's so awful. If we could just, okay, okie dokie. All right. How do I respond to the claim that I am a Roosevelt isolationist? Well, Roosevelt never became a socialist, right? He did intervene heavily to protect capitalism. He did advocate an economic Bill of Rights, but he never fully called for a state-run economy. He believed capitalism was good. It just needed to be highly regulated. And you needed to, regulate capitalism in a way that would make sure there wasn't mass unemployment, because that could give rise to fascism. That was Roosevelt's feeling. He was a populist, a Bonapartist, and kind of a progressive, you could argue it. He was definitely a city builder, and he believed in historical progress. But at the same time, he was not willing to, break with the capitalist ideology. He believed in free markets. He believed in capitalism. I don't. I believe in socialism. I believe that the banks, factories, and industries should be organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. I also think that Roosevelt, he was not anti-racist, right? I wouldn't say Roosevelt. I mean, I haven't found, I'm sure if you dig, you can probably find him saying blatantly racist things, but I've not found that myself, so I'm not ready to level that accusation. He didn't fight Jim Crow in the South. He should have. His wife did. He didn't. He interned the Japanese, and that was wrong. That was a racist policy. All Japanese Americans were not spies for Japan. Roosevelt loved the Rockefellers. He loved the Eastern establishment, and he had an alliance. Almost dropped my dumbbells. Sorry, Bigfoot. Look, Roosevelt's entire life, he had an alliance with the Rockefeller family and with the big oil monopolies and with the Eastern establishment. I think that at this point, those folks are probably the greater evil in American capitalism, the managerial evil. So, I don't know. I think we can learn from Roosevelt, but he was a capitalist politician who entered a strategic alliance with the Soviet Union internationally and entered an alliance with the Communist Party and the labor movement, but it was an unstable alliance. He wasn't always friendly to those folks. Speaking of FDR, thoughts on U.S. provocations against Japan. U.S. provocations led to Pearl Harbor. So there you go. I wouldn't call myself a Rooseveltist and an isolationist. Well, no, I believe that we're going to have a global economy. If I was an isolationist, I would want to build a big wall around the United States. I'm not an isolationist because I believe we're going to have a new global economy based on win-win cooperation and friendship between countries, respecting their sovereignty, trading with each other in a mutually beneficial way. Isolationists want to isolate from the world. On the other hand, I want something like the Belt and Road Initiative out of China. I want a new form of international friendship and cooperation. I would like the United States to trade with Russia and with China and with Cuba and with Venezuela, but to do so in a friendly way. I would like to dismantle imperialism, the global monopoly capitalist system, and build a new society where people trade with each other on a win-win basis. The difference between liberal and leftist. Well, leftism is a political current that comes out of the French Revolution. Leftism argues that we need to kind of remake society. Whereas liberalism is just the philosophy that comes out of the bourgeois revolutions that says individualism above all else and believes in individual rights. The liberalism is the belief that the individual should be protected, human rights, individual rights, open society. KPRF victory. That's what that would mean. Leftism is a current that seeks to build a more egalitarian society through the seizing of power. So these are two different political currents. Liberalism is about individual rights. Leftism is about egalitarianism. They're two different political currents. They arose in roughly the same time, but different goals. Liberalism seeks the autonomy of the individual and the protection of individual rights. Leftism seeks egalitarianism and marching and advancing historical progress through struggle. What is American exceptionalism? Well, the term American exceptionalism was invented to refer to J. Lovestone. Right? J. Lovestone was a leader of a faction in the American Communist Party. When the Communist International took its turn in 1928 toward the third period, he argued that didn't apply to the United States. The USA was the exception to Marx's historical laws. The USA was exceptional to Marxism. Marxism applied to the rest of the world, but not the United States. The USA was exceptional. That's what that term means. And Stalin labeled J. Lovestone as an American exceptionalist, and they were kicked out of the Communist Party. Now, beyond that, the term generally refers to manifest destiny, the belief that the United States is the greatest country in the world and has this unique historical role to play, and that Jesus ordained the United States to rule over the rest of the world, blah, 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 blah. And it refers to the jingoist, the American chauvinism. This is the greatest country in the world. If you don't like it here, move somewhere else. This is the greatest place. It's that awful American exceptionalism, American chauvinism. I don't agree with that, and I don't know how. Sorry, I know a lot of people in the chat are talking about disagreements, and it's like, you can't take these disagreements seriously. And I don't, because it's like anyone who watches these streams or watches my work knows that I'm not going around saying America is the greatest country in the world, and if you don't like it here, you should move. I don't go around saying the USA was not founded on genocide of Native people. I don't go around supporting US wars and interventions around the world. So it's like you have to be an idiot. You really have to be an idiot to think that that's what I think, okay? And if because I call for American patriotism and socialism with American characteristics, you interpret that to mean me saying that slavery was okay, or the genocide of Native Americans was okay, or that I support US wars, or I support American national chauvinism. If that's what you think, you are an idiot, and you are not worth my time, right? I don't know if you watched my debate with a certain Jabba the Vosh, but Jabba the Vosh called me anti-American. And generally, I'm widely accused of being anti-American because I go around supporting governments like the Sandinistas, like Putin in Russia, like the Chinese Communist Party, like the anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist government of Iran. I'm generally considered to be the most anti-American person around. However, I explain to people that no, I am the true patriot because these wars and this global system of monopoly capitalism that dominates the global economy, grinds countries into poverty, is hurting Americans, and that we, the American people, have a responsibility to stand in solidarity with our class brothers around the world against this global system of imperialism. And I don't know what's so hard for people to understand about that. I really don't, know what is so hard for people to understand about that. But no, we're just supposed to have this teenage temper tantrum. And, it's just, you can't take these people seriously. All right, socialist program. Address gun violence. All right, woke McCarthyism. Yeah, I guess what bothers me is that there's a lot of people that are just pathetic. They're just pathetic. I don't know why they don't feel that they can be better than this. I really don't understand why they don't hold themselves to higher standards. Inaccurate Munson report. Munson report. Internment. I really don't know why they don't hold themselves to higher standards. But there's a lot of people on the internet that are young, and they've kind of given up on actually changing the world. They've given up on actually doing anything good, and they have decided instead that they're going to go around and expose other people. And they're going to feel good about themselves by hurting someone else's reputation, by spreading rumors about people, by smearing people, by going around and harassing people who've done something they don't agree with. I pity these people. I feel sorry for them because I think that you have the potential to be more than that. You have the potential to be more than an internet woke McCarthyist. I think you have the potential to actually build real relationships with people, actually change the world, actually wake people up, actually accomplish things. You have the potential to be more than that. You can be a city builder, not a vandal. But they have been so told by this society they don't have potential. They've been so told by this society that this is all that they can do. They're so full of anger and self-doubt and hatred and resentment and hopelessness and pessimism. They're so full of that. They feel like, my life is shit. I'm living in shit. My life is shit. But hey, I can take some of the shit around me and throw it at somebody else. Okay. That sucks. And if you're in that state of mind, I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, that I love you. I love you. I love you. And I think you can be better. And I'm praying every day that you can be better. You might laugh when you hear this. You might think it's sarcasm when you hear this. You might think it's the stupidest thing you've ever heard. But if you're one of these people that feels like you're shit. It feels like you live in shit. It feels like the only hope you can get is by taking some of the shit that you're living in and throwing it at somebody else. I want you to know that I love you. I love you. And I think that there's a part of you, there's a little part of you that can be better than that. There's a little part of you. There's something within you that knows that you can be more than that. You have the potential to be more than that. And I want to help you find that potential. I want to help you find that potential. I want to help you find the city builder within yourself. And I want you and me to work together to help it to blossom. I want you to start doing things you never believed that you can do. I want you to impress yourself, not to impress me, not to impress other people, but I want you to impress yourself. I want you to one day look at yourself and say, wow, did I just do that? That's what I want. Book suggestion. I want you to be better than what you are. And that is what separates me from most of BreadTube. Because most of BreadTube encourages your negative habits. There's literally a channel called Thought Slime. Did you know that? There is actually a channel that calls itself Thought Slime. It's made by this vile character who's a failed comedian who has had a very hard life, is full of hate and dishonesty. JBV Drum is full of hate and dishonesty and pessimism. And he gets on there and he picks people and he lies about them and he throws mud at them. His chat is full of all kinds of people who have a very hard life and difficulty. He tells them that economic growth is bad. He tells them that there is no future. He tells them that everyone should be poorer. And he gets on there and he mobilizes people to just throw slime and feces and semen and garbage at people. Right? And we don't know. We really don't know. There's no way of calculating how many members of his audience have actually committed suicide. But it's probably a high number. And he probably knows that, and he probably thinks that's funny because he believes in overpopulation. He's trying to drive the population down. He thinks human beings are a cancer on Mother Earth. So, he's actively killing his audience. He's actively helping them to fixate on their negative, hopeless feelings. That's a grifter. If you've ever seen a grifter, that is a grifter, right? He's trying to kill off his own species. And again, if I was a grifter, I would just tell you what you want to hear. I would tell you what you might feel good by hearing, I would help you indulge your negative feelings. I would help you indulge your hopelessness. I would help you indulge your rage and your desire to harm other people. But I don't do that because I want to help you. And I got to tell you, look, I don't want to get into too much detail. I will at some point. But the reason that I feel so passionate about this, and the reason that I understand why people sometimes react so negatively to me is because I was once there. Did you know that? I am 33 years old, folks. I'm going to be 34 in December. I was once there. I know this negative state. I know this negative state of mind. I know it. And through some amazing life circumstances and some amazing relationships, some amazing travels, I've been able to get to a higher plane. I've been able to climb to higher ground. I've been able to tap into some truths that have helped me to get out of the slime, to get out of the shit, and to get to a higher place. And it's only through socialism and communism. And it's only been through the unique understanding of socialism and communism that I developed by traveling around the world. By traveling around the world, by studying with people. It's only through that understanding that I was able to get out of the slime, get myself out of the pessimism, get myself out of the slime, and become who I am today. I have a pretty good life, folks. I have a pretty good life, but the reason I have a good life is because my life means something. Because I'm committed to a cause. I'm committed to certain principles. And I'm committed to trying to help other people get out of the slime. I'm an optimist, not a pessimist. I'm a city builder, not a vandal. I try to do better. I make mistakes. There are many times I've made mistakes. You can watch the video of me on Sunday shouting at these right-wing Nicaraguans. Part of me wondered if I should even post it. I had mixed feelings. I don't know if folks have seen that video from yesterday, but I shouted at the right-wing Nicaraguans. I shouted at them. I gave them a piece of my mind. Part of me was thinking, maybe I shouldn't have posted that. Maybe that was too negative. But that's okay. People needed to see that. People needed to see someone standing up to those folks, those, anti-communist, refugee, anti-communist, folks. They fill up the media. It's good to see someone calling them out. So I have my moments, but I try. And I try to lift up other people. I try to lift up other people. I try to help other people. And I try to connect with other people. So if you're an internet woke McCarthyist, throwing shit at people while feeling like you're shit, I want to let you know there's hope. I got out of that. And so can you. You can get out of that. You can do better than that. You can do better, and you will. And I can help you. We can go someplace together. Now, you may not be ready to hear me say that. You may not be ready to hear me say that. You may respond with just hostility to this, and that's okay. That means you're not ready for this. You'll know when you're ready. You'll know when you're ready. I don't know how many people. This is so strange because I have never been in AA. I've never been into any of the help, recovery meetings or anything like that. But so many people have come to me. The amount of people that have come to me, and I would never tell anyone else's private information because, you got to respect people's privacy. But the number of people that have come to me in the last 6 months, 6 months to a year, and said to me, Caleb, I knew who you were. I'd watched some of your videos, I'd read some of your books, but then I hit rock bottom. I realized I was an alcoholic. I realized I was a drug addict, and I started getting sober. I started trying to change my life around. I realized I had a problem with drugs. I had a problem with substance abuse. I had a problem with addiction. And then all of a sudden, I started listening to you, Caleb, and your message made so much more sense. You were the only socialist I could listen to anymore. I couldn't listen to the other socialists anymore, but I could listen to you. Hey, there you go. There you go. I mean, and it's a weird coincidence because, again, I'm not part of the recovery community, but I would say I am recovering in my own way. I'm not recovering from substance abuse, but I'm recovering from my own difficulties. And I don't get into great detail about my personal life, my upbringing, my family. I don't get into that stuff too much. And if people want to do research, they could probably dig up where I'm coming from, why I'm coming from that place. But, I don't get into all that stuff too much. I don't. I really don't. And you shouldn't talk too much about your personal life on these streams. But I'm recovering in my own way. I'm recovering from my own demons. And I've come a long way. And you can too. And we as a country can too. And on top of that, if you're a person who's made mistakes before, if you're a person who's told lies about me, you're a person who's thrown shit directly at me, might be hard for me, but I am committed to forgiving you. Did you know that? I am committed to offering forgiveness to you. Right? Offending me and making an enemy out of me is not a permanent state of being. If you have attacked me before, if you've lashed out at me before, if you've joined the internet hate campaigns against me, but then you hit rock bottom, but then you hit a turning point and you say, you know what, I'm ready to become a city builder. I'm ready to be a socialist. If you reach that point, you're welcome here. You're welcome here. Right? I wouldn't have politically wanted to work with who I was 10 years ago. I'll tell you that much. I would not have wanted to work with myself 10 years ago. But look where I am. People come a long way. People make mistakes. So that's all I can say. There are going to be people who come around. There are going to be people who come around who have been hostile and seen the light. There are going to be people who come around who made mistakes, and that's okay. That's okay. Right? If we're serious about this, this is not just an infotainment. If this is not just infotainment, if this is something serious that we're seriously thinking about doing, if we're seriously thinking about saving America from capitalism and saving the world from imperialism, we're going to have to learn to work with a lot of people. We're going to have to learn to reconcile with a lot of people. You're welcome here. All right, next question. Next question. The conspiracy to kill Dr. Martin Luther King was proved in court. Yes, the King family won a settlement. That is true. That is true, and people don't talk about that. It's one of those things people don't discuss. But yes, the King family has won a settlement from the U.S. government related to the circumstances of Dr. Martin Luther King's death. Sounds like a conspiracy theory. Sounds like something made up, but no, there's actually been court proceedings in which the Martin Luther King family has won money from the U.S. government about the circumstances of the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That is a fact. That is a fact. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., complex figure, became more and more radical and anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist as his life went on. In our book that we just published, Jesus is a Socialist, not only do we have a number of verses from the Bible, but we also have a number of quotations from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. A number of quotations from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. about capitalism and about socialism and about imperialism and war. And some of these quotes will, they will give you chills. The fact that we have a holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The fact that everyone knows this man, but they don't know what he really said. They don't know what he said about imperialism, what he said about capitalism, what he said about socialism and revolution and the working class. Thank you, Io. Thank you very much. The fact that they don't know what he said, people need to know what he said. People need to know what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. If the real Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was known to the people of the United States, no, he wasn't a communist. He was not a Marxist-Leninist, dialectical materialist, but he was definitely a revolutionary, definitely an anti-imperialist. And at the time of his death, he was moving in a very revolutionary direction. If people knew the real Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., this country would be much better off. BreadTube redefines imperialism. Well, look, when you say imperialism, most people think empire. They think imperialism is an empire. It's building an empire. So if a country attacks another country, that's imperialism. Right? Star Wars, they have a whole movie called The Empire Strikes Back. There's this bad guy called Darth Vader, and he's building an empire. So that's what imperialism is. Well, no. Imperialism, according to Lenin, is a global economic system in which banks dominate the global economy and hold back economic development, keeping the world poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. Imperialism is about holding back economic development, keeping people in poverty, holding countries as captive markets, keeping a monopoly on production and profits by Western multinational corporations. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. It is capitalism in its monopoly stage. That is what imperialism is. You know, the next question I've got here is they asked me about CPUSA 2036 and the meme. I'll just be honest, okay? I love Haas and I love infrared. They're doing a lot of great stuff, you know, but I'm sure they don't agree with a lot of stuff I say, and I don't agree with a lot of stuff they say. And honestly, I don't think using that meme is strategic. You know, the Communist Party, I have a lot of friends who are members of the Communist Party. There's a lot of people in the Communist Party who are not my friends. You know, it's mixed. I think there's a lot, you know, and I mean, William Z. Foster, who was the leader of the Communist Party, is one of my greatest heroes. And trust me, the amount of people I know in the CPUSA, the amount of people probably watching this right now that are in the CPUSA is large. So I don't have hatred for that organization. However, I am aware that there are some people in that organization who vehemently disagree with a lot of what we say on here. And that meme set those people off. It made them think that somehow we are conspiring against them, that somehow we are maneuvering to take over their organization and drive them out or something like that. And that the Communist Party has faced infiltration over the years, not just by the American government, but also by Trotskyites, by Maoists. The CPUSA has been, you know, look, I'm trying to use it's been beaten up many, many, many times. The CPUSA was the whipping boy of McCarthyite America, right? I mean, they put him in prison. The FBI went after him. I mean, at one point they were saying that if you were a member of the CPUSA, you couldn't get benefits. The CPUSA was infiltrated. There were American intelligence apparatus was using them to gather information on the Soviet Union, and they have been through hell, okay? And they're still around. And the ones who are still around who've been doing it their whole life, I salute them. I don't always agree with them. They don't always agree with me, but I salute them for staying in that group, for enduring everything they've been through. I salute them, but they're definitely in a state of paranoia. They're afraid. Do you blame them for all that they've been through? They're afraid of government repression. They're afraid of infiltration. They're afraid of ultra-left adventurist violence and attacks on them. So they're, you know, they've been doing this a long time and they've endured a lot. And so this meme, CPUSA 2036, which I've never endorsed, they've made videos that include my face in them, but I've never given an endorsement to that meme. That meme has been used to cause people in the Communist Party to get the wrong impression about me and about the city building tendency and about the Center for Political Innovation. And, you know, it's not the only thing. I'm sure these problems would have developed even without that meme. But unfortunately, that meme has been misinterpreted. It has been misinterpreted, I think. And that has made some people in the Communist Party more hostile to us than they should be. We have no ill will toward the Communist Party or to any other party, right? We have no ill will toward, you know, the Party of Communists. We have no ill will toward the Socialist Party, no ill will toward the Socialist Workers' Party, no ill will toward any of these groups, right? We are a think tank. We are a think tank, the Center for Political Innovation. We are trying to spread the message of socialism. We are trying to build communities of solidarity. We are an educational think tank. That's what we are. So I will just say I don't particularly care for that meme, but I respect the infrared community and everything they've done. I respect them, and I think that you know, they do a lot of great work. And so, but I'm just being frank and honest about how my reaction to that meme has been that maybe it wasn't helpful. Maybe it wasn't well thought out and strategic, but perhaps I'm wrong, right? Maybe in 2036, I'll laugh at this live and say, oh boy, was I wrong. But I just, part of me feels like that's not the right approach to take. But there you go. Alrighty. Will UBI stabilize capitalism? There's definitely a faction of the ruling class that thinks UBI is a method for stabilizing capitalism amid the overall decline in living standards and incomes. That's pretty clear. There is a UBI faction in the ruling class. Andrew Yang is their most outspoken political voice, but there is a UBI faction. But, you know, UBI will require a lot of taxes. I mean, that money doesn't come out of thin air. So, you know, a lot of capitalists would have to pay a lot of taxes, and I think the ultra-rich are ready for UBI. I think the lower-level capitalists are not. All right. U.S. provocations led to Pearl Harbor. Well, there's a book called Day of Deceit that goes into great detail about that, and the fact that, Pearl Harbor was kind of, it was not inevitable, but the United States provoked things leading to it. Many have commented on that. I think there's probably a grain of truth in that, probably more than a grain of truth in that. Does that mean that World War II was not justified? I think World War II was very justified, right? I think that it was necessary. It was necessary for the United States to defeat the Nazis and the Japanese imperialists. But yeah, I mean, people get into the details about Pearl Harbor and all that. That happens. The Communist Party victory. Watch my stream with Donald Corder. And Donald Corder, in his stream, he goes into great detail about the Communist Party and what they stand for, how they want to change modern Russia. So watch my stream with Donald Corder. That was on Friday. I streamed with him, and he went into great detail. All right. What would a socialist program do to address gun violence? Very simple. RPT. Jobs, not jails. Gun violence is related to the underground economy, largely. Mass shootings, not so much, right? Mass shootings, that's related to mental health, that's related to a lot of things, but as far as most gun violence, at the end of the day, most gun violence is people in criminal organizations killing other people in criminal organizations. That's the gun violence in Chicago. That's the spike in gun violence in New York. That's the spike in gun violence in Los Angeles. It's people in criminal organizations killing members of other criminal organizations and people being killed in the crossfire. People don't want to join criminal organizations. People would much rather get good-paying jobs in non-criminal organizations. So, jobs, not jails, economic opportunity, growth, economic development. That's the socialist solution. The Munson Report was what convinced Roosevelt to engage in internment. I don't know the specifics of that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Roosevelt was lied to about a lot of things. Roosevelt was told that he couldn't bomb the trains and stop the Holocaust. They said, we couldn't do that. Well, it turns out he could have, and he wanted to stop the Holocaust and bomb the trains to Auschwitz, but he was told that they couldn't, right? He was lied to so that's not the only time, right? And, Roosevelt, I think he was somebody who wanted to do right. He was not a socialist, not a communist, but he was on the right side. He was an anti-fascist, and he was a city builder. He was a progressive person, and I think he was negotiating with all kinds of different forces. There you go. All right. The book suggestion, Communism of Love. I'll have to look that up. I will have to look up that book suggestion, Communism of Love. I'll have to read it. Can't comment on it. The John Brown Volunteers. It was Keaton of the John Brown Volunteers was asking people to donate so they could get a snare drum. And they received some donations in order to get the snare drum. I saw Keaton this afternoon. He did not yet have the snare drum, but he plans to go and buy the snare drum. So there you go. But that was him. I didn't collect that funds, and that was after they went to a rally for universal basic income, and they thought their intervention at that rally would have been better if they'd had a snare drum. So he got on the Discord server, I believe, he told me, and he went on and he asked for a donation, and they do intend to buy a snare drum. So there you go. All right, what is my feeling on the fourth political theory? I have made a rule, no Dugin questions, but I'll just quickly, that fourth political theory is a book written by Alexander Dugin that argues that there is a new development around the world that has elements of both the left and the right that is fighting Western imperialism. Right, it has elements of both fascism and communism combined to defeat Western capitalism. And I think the book makes a lot of good points and is very insightful, but there are some things that I would disagree with in the book. I believe in historical progress. Historical progress and futurism is a big part of what I believe. Fourth political theory rejects that. Fourth political theory is quite conservative on social issues. I have no problem with gay marriage. I have no problem with abortion. But it's interesting. It's very observant. And if you want to know what people around the world that are anti-imperialist think, whether it's in Nicaragua or Iran or China or Venezuela, the fourth political theory offers some good insight into how folks like that think. All right, folks, and that is the end of the Super Chats. So if there's anything else people want me to comment on, speak now or forever hold your peace, because that's all the Super Chats I've received. So if anyone else has something they want me to comment on, now is the time. Now is the time. So if you have anything else, any other Super Chat questions, now is the time, because if not, then I'm going to end this stream. We've been going for 129 minutes and 47 seconds. At this very moment, there are 189 people watching. I didn't miss your Super Chat on leftism versus liberalism. I talked about it. Roll the thing back. There are 174 likes. So if anyone has any last Super Chat questions, it's now or never. My heart won't wait. Isn't that an Elvis song, I think? It's now or never, my heart won't wait. All right, well, it's looking like we don't have any last-minute questions. So on that note, folks, I will be back tomorrow. It'll probably be a late-night stream tomorrow, probably like 10:30, maybe 10. But yeah, I'm going to do this again tomorrow. So we'll be back. On that note, folks, a new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Fusion City now. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Good night, folks.